It's time to gear up. If I win this week, I'm in the fantasy football championship. I know you can say the same thing, and I'm going to try my best to get us there together. Now, tier one, we are going to introduce a new RB1, a new king. Jahmyr Gibbs is about to get every touch in the league's best offense, behind the league's best offensive line. And Gibbs has been one of the most efficient running backs all season. If you are looking at this man's stat line, he is the RB3 in total fantasy points, and that's with David Montgomery taking 15-ish opportunities a game. So no Montgomery does make Gibbs my RB1. Pretty big spread against the Bears here, where the Lions should be able to run the ball consistently. Saquon Barkley usually is in a tier by himself, but we just don't know if he is fully healthy. Now, of course, you're starting everybody in this tier. You're starting Bijan Robinson, our next guy as well, even if Michael Penix Jr. is under center, and sportsbooks did move the implied team total down just slightly when Atlanta announced that Penix would be starting over Kirk Cousins. Clearly, there's a wider range of outcomes, but this is a game with a pretty big spread, right? I mean, you do have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers currently favored by about 8.5 points. Now, going over to our next tier, we're going to be led off with Chase Brown. This game also has a massive spread. You have the Bengals favored by 7.5 points, where you do have Cincinnati, of course, projected out to be a top 3 offense in the NFL in total points scored this week. Chase Brown has seen 80+% of the snaps every single week in this offense since you had the Zach Moss injury. This is a running back that during that time has also been up averaging about 5 to 6 targets a game. So you have the receiving usage, you have the 3-down skill set, you have the offensive output. I mean, the man since Zach Moss been down is averaging over 20 fantasy points a contest. I mean, easy top 5 back. HN, easy top 5 back. You did see the Miami Dolphins struggle in a big time way against Houston. Sportsbooks did predict that if you look at the implied team total, but it frankly didn't matter. This is kind of like the Kamara situation, of course, where yeah, he may be stuck in a bad offense some weeks, but the receiving floor that you get is going to outweigh any loss that you have from red zone opportunities. I mean, you had the 7 receptions for 35 receiving yards. So even a crap week, HN still giving you 14.5 points. And this matchup here going up against the Niners actually should be a much closer game where you actually do have the Miami Dolphins with an implied team total about 22.5 to 23 points. While at the same time, they are actually favored this game just slightly ahead of the Niners. Josh Jacobs will be our next running back. Now, y'all know I have Jacobs in a ton of leagues, feeling real good. And this is the first week in a while where I think we're going to be allowed to rank Josh Jacobs over Derrick Henry. And our Jacobs over Henry call may not look so bad when it's all said and done, because this is a running back that over the past 5 games has scored 9 touchdowns. And this week, he's going up against the New Orleans Saints, where you actually have a spread of 13.5 points, where the Packers presumably are going to run the ball over and over again. And in that environment, I think you can be very excited about Josh Jacobs because they have been leaning on him since the bye week, regardless, even if the game was close, and that won't be this against the Saints. Now, going over to our next running back with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry has been very disappointing, of course. Derrick Henry has not hit 15 fantasy points since week 9. However, we know that Derrick Henry early in this season was feasting with touchdowns, and Derrick Henry through the first half of the year was the running back 1 overall. Now, this matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers is a very tough one. You're going to assume that Derrick Henry still doesn't really see much work as a receiver. He's only had 2 games with 2 or more receptions this season. So touchdown or bust running back, clearly a very good back, very good offense. You have an implied team total about 25.5 points here. And surprisingly, there is a pretty big spread on this game where you actually do have the Ravens favored by about 6 points. Our next running back will be Joe Mixon. With Mixon, disappointing contest this past week with only 10.5 points. But the man has been a stud pretty much every game he's played this year. Again, the issue primarily is going to be it's a pretty tough matchup going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. And actually, if we're looking at the live over-under of this game, according to sportsbooks, this should be the 3rd lowest scoring game of the week, only ahead of the Jags, Raiders, Giants, and Falcons. So it's going to be a game that's probably dominated with defense. Now, a big thing, of course, is if Mahomes does play, then you assume the total goes up. But as it stands right now, you do have the Kansas City Chiefs favored by about 3 points in this game. So I'd assume Mahomes plays. who did practice on Tuesday. Now, going over to our next tier, we are going to be looking at James Conner now. Yours truly is fighting for his life this week in the Flock League. Thank God I had a bye week last week. Probably would have lost if I didn't. This week, I need James Conner to come through for us in a big-time way. It's a phenomenal matchup going up against Carolina. James Conner dropped 30 points against the New England Patriots last week, and this is what we spent the second half of the season talking about. The fact that James Conner has the best fantasy football playoff schedule of any running back in the league. So hopefully we're able to see what he did last week come through yet again. We know the receiving floor has been pretty damn consistent. Not only has the receiving floor been consistent, but at the same time, in these environments such as, the Carolina Panthers, you actually can get excited about the possibility of him scoring that rushing touchdown. If you're looking at his projection on Underdog Fantasy this week, he is higher, lower, 80.5 rushing yards. Now, going over and looking at Kyren Williams, Kyren has had back-to-back weeks here with over 30 opportunities. He is seeing every single opportunity, every single touch in his backfield. He actually is slightly higher with the projections over on Underdog. We're on Underdog Fantasy. They have Kyren Williams, higher, lower, 81.5 rushing yards in comparison to Conner, only at 80. But the difference is you don't really have the receiving floor with Kyren Williams as you do with James Conner, at least since you've had the addition of Cooper Kupp as well as Puka Nacua, as you have seen the majority of that target volume that he had at the beginning of the season get filtered back over to the receivers. I'm going over and looking at James Cook. With Cook, yes, I know that he will have some down performances. 2 weeks back, he only scores 5 fantasy points. But again, you just roll with the punches here, right? This is projected out to be the highest scoring offense in the league this week. Currently, the Bills are sitting with an implied team total of about 29.5 points. They are 14-point favorites over the New England Patriots. So you operate under the assumption that you're going to see a ton of points scored in Buffalo. James Cook does have touchdown equity inside the red zone. That's what we've seen all season, with James Cook averaging effectively a touchdown a game so far this year. And again, you saw James Conner drop 30 points on the New England Patriots last week. James Cook is currently higher, lower, 70.5 rushing yards on Underdog, which should be lower than what we see with Chuba Hubbard. Actually, Hubbard's down only at 65.5. I figured Hubbard's line would be higher than that. And I may not even hate going higher than 65.5 rushing yards for Chuba Hubbard, where you're looking at Hubbard effectively in back-to-back weeks, having 97% of the snaps and having absolutely everything in this backfield. Now, of course, the Carolina Panthers were an extremely disappointing offense against the Dallas Cowboys this past week, but this week, you actually do have a decent spot against Arizona, or at least that's what sportsbooks are currently projecting, where the spread in this game is currently sitting only at 4.5 points. So it could be a competitive contest. And if Chuba Hubbard's going to see 95+% of the opportunities, he is one of the true 3-down bell cows in the league, similar to Jonathan Taylor. And we go over to Taylor. Taylor is higher, lower, 81.5 rushing yards on Underdog. My thing is Hubbard's going to have the receiving volume that Taylor won't. Y'all know I'm a big Jonathan Taylor fanboy. I mean, we drafted a lot of Jonathan Taylor years ago. And if you're looking at the underlying volume here, he does still see every opportunity in Indianapolis. The fundamental issue that you're going to have is, one, you don't have the checkdowns. So two, if you're looking at Taylor, you're really only seeing a touchdown or bust running back. And with those touchdowns, A-Rich can vulture him. Now, I understand, yes, he came close to a touchdown this past week, and of course he can in terms of those breakaway runs. But the issue is when you're in the half-yard line, when you're on the 1-yard line, AR may just take the ball himself. So even though Taylor is higher, lower, 81.5 rushing yards, which is a much higher projection than what you have with Chuba or James Cook, given the limited usage as a receiver as well as the possible loss with the touchdowns at the goal line, I think you have to rank him behind him. But it is a good matchup against Tennessee, where Will Levis has been benched. This is a Titans offense that is really floundering. So you do have the Indianapolis Colts favored by about 3.5 points here. But of course, if you want to say, Mason, you're an idiot, James Cook is going higher than 70.5 rushing yards, or Chuba Hubbard's going higher than 65.5. You can find those projections over there on Underdog Fantasy. With Pick'em, it's available in damn near every state. Yes, it's in Texas. Yes, it's in California. Yes, it's in New York. Yes, it's in Florida. If you use code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you're actually going to get a free Joe Burrow pick'em, more than less than half total yard for that Thursday night game, with a link in the description and comment section. Rico Dowdle will be our next back, and he has established himself as a true 3-down workhorse. Over the past month, every single game, he has seen 20 plus opportunities. This matchup going up against Tampa, we did see the Chargers get absolutely boat raced, but the Cowboys have been decent. Spread in this game currently is actually only 4 points. So if Dallas can stay in it, they can probably run the ball. Now, I will say, while Dowdle's looked great over the past month, you do have to contextualize this and go, okay, well, they beat Washington. They beat the Giants. The Cincinnati game came down to the very end, and they just beat the Carolina Panthers. So in these games, which they probably get out of hand, and maybe Dallas isn't able to just run the ball in the second half, Dowdle's probably worse than what he has been. But of course, I don't want to sit here and project on that too much. Breece Hall will be our next running back. With Breece, clearly wasn't fully healthy this past week, only played 48% of the snaps. I mean, you had to have Aaron Rodgers go absolutely nuclear, and for Breece Hall to kind of get a lucky rushing touchdown for him to get there with the 13 fantasy points. Not super worried about this matchup going up against the Rams. You do have the Jets projected out to be about an average offense with the 22-point implied team total. Clearly, you are hoping that Breece does end up seeing more snaps and hopefully draws a few more targets out of the backfield as well. Spread in this game currently is only 3.5 points. Now, Aaron Jones will be our next back. With Aaron Jones, I think a big thing to monitor is if Geno Smith's going to be playing this next week. If you have no Geno, I think we assume that the Minnesota Vikings are able to easily take care of business here, where they can lean on Aaron Jones a little bit more. And what's maybe a little bit frustrating with Jones is, while it's a running back, of course, that we have learned through his entire NFL career, great pass catcher, expect the receiving workload. Realistically, since the bye week, the man has not had a single game with 5 targets. So really, you're leaning on a first and second down back, sprinkled in a little bit of receiving usage. But the touchdowns have been there. It's been a great offense. And if you have no Geno Smith, I think that the spread is going to balloon. Isaac Guerendo will be our next RB. With Guerendo, I think you could actually move him up to about RB 13 if you really wanted, because what we have seen is, they're going to continue to use him as a feature back. I mean, he had 17 opportunities before he got injured against Chicago. He was the guy. And then against the Rams, in a game which we didn't even know he was going to play, he plays 76% of the snaps and sees 20 opportunities. Now, am I going to sit here and try to sell that Isaac Guerendo is the best running back in the world? Of course not. But maybe the Niners can get a little bit healthier. Maybe Guerendo can get a little bit healthier with the 10-day rest that they had from the last Thursday night game. And if you're going to get any 3-down running back, I'm fine taking them. Bucky Irving will be our next back. With Bucky, very much split in the backfield this past week. You have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just going nuclear, boat racing the Chargers. So I don't want to read too much into the opportunities and the split between Bucky and Rachaad White. I think you can pretty comfortably say that, Bucky Irving is the starting running back here, but it's still very much a committee. Now, you do have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers projected out yet again to be one of the highest scoring offenses in the league. They are only projected behind the Bills, Packers, Bengals, and Lions with total points this week. And Bucky obviously does have receiving upside. Now, Brian Robinson will be our next play. With Brian Robinson, not the best matchup in the world going up against Philly. Y'all know my favorite pick'em last week was Brian Robinson to go higher than 4.5 receiving yards. Given the fact that you have no Austin Eckler, I think naturally Brian Robinson will get a little bit more used as a receiver. And that's a big hope that you have to have this next week against the Eagles, especially knowing that you do have the Eagles pretty heavily favored at 3.5 points in comparison to what I was personally expecting it to be. So if you are Brian Robinson, touchdown upside, maybe a little bit capped with an applied team total of only about 21 points. But if you're going to get that bump in receiving usage with no Eckler, I think you can outweigh it. I'm going over to Jerome Ford. Ford will have a receiving role, and he will be in an offense that's going up against the worst defense in the NFL. Clearly, Cincinnati is just absolute dog water. The thing with this, however, is they are on their third quarterback. So if you're looking at this Cleveland Browns offense, it's very similar to what we had with the Tennessee Titans last week, where we were sitting here going, okay, well, it's a garbage offense playing a garbage defense. So if you're ever going to start this dude, it's this week. If you're ever getting Jerome Ford into your lineup with no Nick Chubb, I would recommend that you do it now. DeAndre Swift will be a running back that I am sadly probably going to have to start myself. So just pulling this up, this is what I'm going to be debating all week. And of course, I'll let y'all know both on the Flock League channel as well as with the flex rankings later this week and the rankings on the site, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What I end up deciding to do here between two of the running backs I have in this tier. We're going to rank DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, Najee Harris, back to back to back. Swift has been a bum. DeAndre Swift has scored one game with double-digit fantasy points since week 9. It's been horrendous. He has had horrendous matchups. The offense has looked atrocious. Going up against this Lions defense that's dealing with a multitude of injuries, I'm kind of surprised to see you have an implied team total of almost 21 points. And Swift did see 20 opportunities this past week against Minnesota. Going over to Tony Pollard. Pollard only plays 44% of the snaps. Pollard has been dealing with the ankle injury. Tajee Spears looks damn good. Spears is everything as a receiver this past week. And you're probably in a worse offense than what we see in Chicago. And the Pittsburgh Steelers right now are projected out yet again to be a very, very bad offense. We saw sportsbooks rank the Pittsburgh Steelers bottom 5 in the NFL with their implied team total last week. And you were seeing the same exact thing this week with Pittsburgh currently projected to be the 4th or 5th lowest scoring offense in the league. Not to mention that Najee Harris with the fumble this past week does see a season low, both 7 opportunities as well as only 33% of the snaps. So for me, what I'm planning on at the moment is I'm planning on rolling with DeAndre Swift. And honestly, I may be moving Najee Harris down even further in these rankings because the last thing I want to do is start Najee Harris. Hell, the last thing I want to do is start any of these running backs beyond really the top 19-ish options. We go over to RB24. Isaiah Pacheco. Now, I guess the Chiefs are about 3-point favorites here over Houston. If that's the case, maybe Pacheco's a little more interesting, but this is a running back that's not getting used as a receiver that's splitting 50-50 with Kareem Hunt. Ramondre Stevenson's in a game against Buffalo in which the Patriots are currently 14-point dogs and probably can't run the ball. And Ramondre Stevenson really hasn't had anything as a receiver himself. This dude has 2 games all year with more than 20 receiving yards. I simply don't know how to rank Zach Charbonnet or Kenneth Walker just yet. Obviously, I'll be updating my rankings as we go through the week over on flockfantasy.com. I'll get you all the updated flex rankings at the end of the week, but there are a lot of moving pieces here. We need to know the health of Geno, the health of Kenneth Walker before I can rank the Seattle guys. Tyrone Tracy, yet again, you do have the Giants projected out to be a horrendous offense. Now, there are 3 offenses that are projected to be by far and away worse than the rest of the league this week. Last week, the rest of the league was pretty close, and the only offense that was at the very bottom that was far away from anybody was New York. This week, it's a little bit different. New York has a better matchup, but there are 2 offenses joining them. You have the Patriots and the Saints alongside the New York Giants that project to be not just very bad, but bottom of the barrel, where you really don't want to be looking at anybody here that's not going to get 100% of the opportunities in their backfield. So looking at Tracy, I'm not interested, just like we weren't last week. Going over and looking at Rachaad White, you have another week for Bucky Irving to be fully healthy. Rachaad White does see the majority of the work this past week, but again, this past week was a very unique game against Los Angeles where they just blow them out of the water. I'm going over to Miller. This is a running back that is not a receiving option. He's not going to catch the ball out of the backfield. And the Saints project to be the worst offense in the NFL. And they are 13.5-point dogs. So I don't want a touchdown or bust running back that's never proven anything, that at the same time will not catch the ball in a garbage offense. Amir Abdullah, I just simply don't know the health of the other running backs in Las Vegas at this point. Best case scenario, you're the passing down back in a garbage offense. Travis Etienne and the Jacksonville Jaguars actually project out to be a better option this week than they did a week ago because it's a good matchup against the Raiders. Jalen Warren, hell, this is now a 3-man running back by committee with Cordell Patterson getting some usage. Tajee Spears could move up here, But ultimately, if you are looking at Spears going up against Indianapolis, you probably see them skew a little bit more towards Tony Pollard. Javonte Williams, Gus Edwards, no thank you, and no thank you. But I think that's all I got for you. Of course, I'm going to be tinkering a little bit with the bottom end of these rankings as the week goes on. And I know that it is paramount. Nothing's more important than getting these rankings correct this week. So I'm going to try to do what I can for y'all. I'm going to try to gear up and make sure we take it down. But of course, if you want to say, Mason, you're an idiot, Najee Harris is going to crush. You can go take higher than 48.5 rushing yards on Najee Harris over there on Underdog Fantasy. For me, I'd be terrified. I'm terrified to start Najee this week. But of course, the link to Underdog Fantasy is in the description. It's in the comment section. Code FLOCK will get you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, on top of that, you'll actually be getting that free Joe Burrow pick, more than less than half a total yard for that Thursday night game. But I think that's all I got for you. I really do appreciate you and really hope we get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.